News when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Nathan Hager.
And I'm Karen Moskow.
Karen, global stocks are trading at a record as we close out the trading week. The S&P 500 enters today's session at an all-time high with its first record close since late October. Bloomberg Markets reporter Valerie Teitel has more on what's leading the gains.
The equity market rally has been not really about the tech trade, but more about value stocks over growth stocks. Now, this has been a theme of the last month. If we look over the last 30 trading days, the Russell 2000 is up some 6%. Meanwhile, the S&P 500 and the NASDAQ are just up around half of 1%. Yes, we did notch those record highs, the new fresh record high, the first one for the S&P 500 since October, but it's really been led by the value stocks. And you have to start wondering whether this is a trend that's going to start continuing into next year. Do we continue to see some of the froth come out of these AI valuations?
Bloomberg Markets reporter Valerie Teitel notes the Russell 2000 index of the smallest U.S. stocks jumped 1.2% to close at its own record high.
Well, Nathan, we're seeing weakness once again in an AI-related stock. A day after Oracle plunged almost 11%, shares of Broadcom are down almost 6% in early trading. The chipmaker's sales outlook for the AI market failed to meet investors' lofty expectations. CEO Hock Tan said the company, which competes with NVIDIA, has a backlog of $73 billion in AI product orders, disappointing some investors. He later clarified that figure as a minimum. Bloomberg Intelligence senior analyst Kunjan Sabani says the market reaction is surprising.
There seems to be an overall fatigue coming into the AI space. But fundamentally, when we just look at Broadcom, this was one of the most strongest AI semis report this quarter. I mean, they beat the AI revenue numbers for next quarter of their fiscal 1Q by almost $1.4 billion, which is a 20% upside to what the street was.
And Bloomberg Intelligence's Kunjan Sabani says Broadcom held off on giving an annual AI revenue forecast.
Karen, let's turn now to the latest on the war in Ukraine. President Trump says the U.S. would be willing to contribute assistance to Ukraine as part of a security agreement to end the conflict. This comes as President Volodymyr Zelenskiy is proposing a referendum that would let Ukrainians vote on whether to hand over the Donbas region to Russia. We get more from Bloomberg senior Europe correspondent Oliver Crook.
This is a really interesting approach by Zelenskiy. I think that it's sort of rooted in the fundamental idea that Zelenskiy has adopted ever since that terrible meeting in the White House back in February, which is basically there are no bad ideas out of Washington, D.C. So something that even appears intensely confrontational and something that could be a collision between the Ukrainians and the Americans. Basically, Zelenskiy tries to use the momentum of that idea and put it in a channel that is actually favorable and useful to him. You saw that happen actually twice this week. Once on the question of holding elections within Ukraine. Now talking about the issue of Donbas. This is clever for two reasons for Zelenskiy. The first, basically, it would prove that if the Ukrainian people vote against it and they say, listen, we are willing to endure this war, that Zelenskiy is not the impediment to peace. It is the Ukrainian people who have decided it. But also it puts on full display that this is a democratic nation and that they are going to the people to make the most difficult decisions.
Bloomberg's Oliver Crook says the U.S. has dramatically scaled back direct military aid for Ukraine under President Trump.
Well, Nathan, tensions between the U.S. and Venezuela have hit a new level this week, but the seizure of a massive oil supertanker may be just the beginning of a new phase of pressure against Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro. President Trump says the military campaign against alleged drug trafficking boats from Venezuela has already been working.
If you look at the drug traffic by sea is down 92%. And nobody can figure out who the 8% is because I have no idea. Anybody getting involved in that right now is not doing well. And we'll start that on land, too. It's going to be starting on land pretty soon.
President Trump spoke from the Oval Office. Sources tell Bloomberg News the capture of the sanctioned oil vessel is meant to deny Maduro an economic lifeline and force him to give up power. The Treasury Department has already followed up the seizure with sanctions on 6 crude oil tankers and 4 of Maduro's so-called narco nephews. And that's news when you want it with Bloomberg News Now. I'm Karen Moskow.
I'm Nathan Hager, and this is Bloomberg.